7.2, acetyl-CoA and the citric acid cycle. So here's our diagram. Again, we're going to refer to this a couple more times before we complete this lesson. Glycolysis was the first step. Occurs outside of the mitochondria. Glucose was split into two molecules of pyruvate. The next step is the preparatory reaction. So we're going to utilize the pyruvate that feeds into the preparatory reaction. So our 3-carbon pyruvate is going to be added to a molecule called coenzyme A. And the product then of this preparatory reaction is a 2-carbon molecule that is called acetyl-CoA. In the process, some additional NAD is going to be reduced. So we're feeding this reaction at the same time we are extracting just a little bit of energy. Now we need to count our carbons. We begin with a 3-carbon pyruvate molecule, and the acetyl-CoA only has 2 carbons. Right? So that 3rd carbon is released. This is where we form the first molecule of carbon dioxide. So one of the end products of our reaction, a waste product of cellular respiration, is carbon dioxide that we exhale. So glycolysis is followed by the preparatory reaction. That preparatory reaction produces the acetyl-CoA, and now that acetyl-CoA is going to feed into the next step, which is the citric acid cycle, which occurs now inside the mitochondria. So acetyl-CoA enters the mitochondria, and that feeds into the citric acid cycle. So here a little simple diagram that represents the acetyl-CoA. That's a 2-carbon molecule. In the first step, it is added to a 4-carbon molecule called oxaloacetate. And this produces a 6-carbon molecule called citric acid. So this is the molecule from which the cycle derives its name. This 6-carbon citric acid is going to undergo a number of rearrangements and oxidations. There are several steps in this cycle, but ultimately the citric acid gets converted back into this same 4-carbon oxaloacetate molecule. So we're going to continually go through glycolysis, the preparatory reaction, and this acetyl-CoA continuously feeds into the citric acid cycle. However, during these reactions, the rearrangements and oxidations that take place, the cell produces some ATP, and it also reduces some additional NAD and FAD. And so this all represents some energy that is being harvested. This is energy that began in the glucose molecule, and it is being extracted, and the energy is now going to be stored in the NADH, the FADH2, and the ATP. Now let's count carbons again. We added 2 carbons to the citric acid cycle and then ended up with a 4-carbon molecule. And so 2 carbons are missing. And so this accounts for the additional carbon dioxide waste product that results from cellular respiration. Now one other thing to remember, each glucose gets split into 2 pyruvates. Each of those pyruvates becomes an acetyl-CoA. And so for each glucose that enters the pathway, the citric acid cycle goes twice. And so by the time we have completed the citric acid cycle twice, there have been a total of 6 carbon dioxides produced. And so at this point, that glucose has been completely oxidized to carbon dioxide. We began with 6 carbons in glucose. We have produced now 6 CO2 molecules. So if we look back at our summary equation, what we are trying to accomplish is the oxidation of glucose and ultimately the reduction of oxygen. So the first part of that has been completed. Okay, the glucose has been turned into carbon dioxide. However, we haven't done anything with oxygen as of yet. That oxygen has not been reduced. So where are those electrons that we have been stripping away from glucose? Okay. They are currently being held by our little electron shuttles. Each of these steps where we have produced NADH and FADH2, again, that is some stored energy that has been taken from the glucose molecule. So now we need to use that NADH and FADH2, and that is going to occur in the final step of this pathway, which is the electron transport chain.